So some time ago I made a video on 5 books to get better at jazz guitar, and that video seemed to be doing pretty well. So I guess what that means is that some people who watch my videos also really like books, so I thought I'd talk about that because I got some books right here. Hey, what's going on everyone? This is Nick. If you're new here, I'm a Brooklyn-based musician, and today I'm going to be talking about 5 books that I think every musician should read. So let's jump right into it. The first one is this book right here. It is Lessons from a Streetwise Musician by Ramon Ricker. This book is a really good one that was actually recommended to me by Ben Wendell when I reached out and asked him about any book recommendations in music business. And Ramon Ricker is a professor at the Eastman School of Music, and he teaches a bunch of classes on business and stuff like that. One thing that I really liked about this book was his talk about Legos, and not just because I'm a huge fan of the toy, although I am, but one thing that he talks about a lot, and one thing that I sort of subscribe to, is that every little part of your career and everything you learn is sort of like Legos, in which you build on top of it, and eventually you have like a foundation. You have like a house that you built from the little pieces. So what he talks about is sort of like keeping your eye open for opportunities, seeing what you're good at, and sort of how you can make your own unique career based on the unique skills that you have and you can present. And so it really was a good book. It says what you won't learn at most music schools right on the cover, and you know, it's true. A lot of the stuff he talked about, I didn't really see in my 7 years of jazz school, so, you know, I definitely recommend this book. He also just generally talks about a lot of money tips, like saving money, investing in money, and all this stuff. Some of it kind of flew over my head and I have to read again, but, you know, it was a lot of good information, and I definitely would recommend this one. The next one is one that I'm actually currently reading, and I'm really digging it. I've read books by him before. This one's by Mixerman, and it's called Musician's Survival Guide to Make a Killer Record. And what I really find interesting about this book is that he's not actually, like, addressing audio engineers or, like, mixing engineers or, like, kind of audio nerds, but just musicians in general, and he talks about like leaning into the limitations you have at your home studio. One thing that I think throughout the pandemic we all recognize as an important skill as a musician. And a lot of resources that I've read kind of are really into the technical nitty-gritty kind of stuff, like things that real like audio nerds will like kind of swoon over. But this one actually addresses musicians and ways to make a killer record, you know, like the title says. And he gives a lot of valuable tips. He does it in a very easy way, and he's also like just a great writer. I also have this book on Zen and the Art of Mixing 2021, which is an update of this book. And this was actually the first mixing book I ever read. I really recommend this, but that's if you're trying to be a mixing engineer. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this to all musicians. But anyway, Mixerman is a really great writer, and he actually has a really engaging way of keeping you engaged throughout the whole book. And one thing that I see in a lot of these audiobooks is that it's like overly technical, and it's just like very like, this is how you do this. But he actually really tells a story through it. He like curses throughout the book. It's great. Like, it's like as if he knows you and he's just like giving you advice, which is something that I really love. So definitely recommend this one. The next one is Primacy of the Ear by Rand Blake. Now this one helped me a lot in my journey. I've gotten some comments from a few friends that they're like, oh, you really have this like original voice when you play and in your compositions. And like when they hear my tunes, they like know it's mine instantly, which is super flattering. That's like the best compliment I've ever received. And I think in part I owe it to this book, Primacy of the Ear. Now, Rand Blake in this book talks about ear training for the first part and like ear training tips, which is super important for every musician, no matter what you're doing, because your ear is like what you're gonna rely on. If you're writing songs, improvising, composing, arranging, even just playing in a band, it's to your benefit to have a really strong ear. But one thing that he actually addresses in this book is how to cultivate your own original style and sort of like assimilate what you're picking up in your ears into your playing. So I found it to be a really great resource, and it was a really interesting read. Definitely recommend this one. It's also a very small book, so he delivers all the information really concisely, and like it's really fast read. You could probably read it in like a day or so. But anyway, Primacy of the Ear by Rand Blake, great one. The next one is this huge chunk of book called How to Make It in the New Music Business, Practical Tips on Building a Loyal Following and Making a Living as a Musician by Ari Herstand. He actually has a blog called Ari's Takes, and he has tons of stuff on the internet, so even if you don't want to pick up this book, you can check him out and like check out all the stuff, because he gives great resources and most of them are free. But this book, when I read it, it sort of like opened my eyes to a lot of different other potentials to make money as a musician. One thing he talked about was college tours, which like I had never really thought of, partially because, you know, I've been a college student for a while. I'm out now, but like I didn't even think that was like a thing. I was just like, oh, I like go to a school. How can I approach someone? But he breaks down the process on how to sort of get that, and like different ways of how people have made their careers in music, made money in music, and how they kind of got through everything. I found this to be extraordinarily useful, and it's a huge book. And I think it's about like 500 pages or so. It's a really big read, but it's really great. And he gives a lot of insight into a lot of different topics that are worth exploring. I'm not even sure that I've actually ever finished reading this book, but I sort of go through it all the time and look through the different chapters. And when I'm like, oh, how do I do this? this, I look through here and find some kind of resource. So it's a really great guide. And then finally, the last one is The Musician's Career Guide, Turning Your Talent into Sustained Success. This one's actually by the great jazz drummer Ulysses Owen Jr. And when I saw this book was available, I immediately ordered it. One of my friends is actually pretty tight with Ulysses, and Ulysses is like his mentor figure. And I really like my friend and think he's like a great musician. So I was like, okay, gotta pick this up. Ulysses definitely has some knowledge. But what I found really interesting about it was that it's like one of the first ever music business books that I've seen that's written by like a jazz musician who is like made their career playing jazz music. I don't really see that often, and a lot of these music business books are tailored to like indie rock or songwriters or pop musicians and stuff like that, you know? I don't really see that much for jazz musicians, and a lot of it is like sort of talking about how he made a career his way and like what he did in order to do it, and it's kind of like saying, this is how I did it, you know, maybe you can find some inspiration like this, and giving like real examples and real things that he like messed up on, so that way you can avoid messing up on those same things. I think I finished reading this in like 2 days. I was like really captivated because Ulysses is also a great writer, but he brings up a lot of great thought-provoking points that are really good things to think about throughout the course of this book, and ultimately throughout the course of your career. And if you want some more books to check out, I have this video on 5 amazing books to get better at jazz guitar. You can also check out my website njroos.com, where I have a blog section, and here I have a bunch of book reviews and what I thought about some of these books, so you can check out those there. But anyway, that's about all I have for you today. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Take care.